welcome all. Thanks so much for joining us at the new time of 2 o'clock. We thought we would try and bring it just a wee bit earlier so that those who have school runs to do can manage to come along, attend, and then dash off to collect who they need to. The session is being recorded, so please bear that in mind. We will make the recording available afterwards. PraxisAuril KE and Coffee sessions. I'm Alasdair Cameron. I'm the Director of Strategic Engagement with PraxisAuril. Tamsin, would you like to say hello?
Yeah, so I'm Tamsin Mann, Director of Policy and Communication at PraxisAuril.
Okay, and for those of you with us live today, if I can ask you to keep your mics and cameras off until you're asked to do otherwise, if you want to ask a question. We'll use or try and use the raised hand feature. So if you do have something that you want to interject with, then please click that, and hopefully Tamsin or I will notice you doing that, and we can get you there. The chat should be on, I think. Again, it has been a bit of a while since I've used this, so hopefully the chat's on. Feel free to chat with each other, which obviously not ideal given that Tamsin and I are trying to speak to you, but if you do want to do that, then that's fine, or ask any questions on that. Once we've had our initial discussion, then we'll look for input from the floor, and at that point we'll ask you if you're able to turn your mic and camera on so that we can see you and have that conversation. Okay, so we can get underway. So the first one that we're having back since a bit of a break, we thought that we might have come back in a slightly better situation. I don't think neither Tamsin nor I had the premonition that actually we'd be going slightly back under in terms of lockdown type restrictions. So we introduced this all during lockdown. We didn't have it in our mind that reintroducing it would send us back down that direction. The title that we gave for this was Changes and Challenges. Really, it's just a chance to catch up. There's been quite a bit of activity, I think, over the kind of summer period. So we'll try and, well, I'll try and pick Tamsin's brain on your behalf and just what we've been doing from a policy point of view. As I said, COVID's still a big thing on the agenda. I was mentioning to Tamsin before we came online, I happened to be in around Strathclyde University's campus this morning, and it's quite an eerie place given that we were into probably the first or second week of term. Normally, I'm deluged by people asking for directions and trying to get myself to whatever meeting I was going to without joining 30 other students in a lift. Today there was nobody there, which is quite disconcerting for I guess for all universities around the UK. But you know, that visit this morning really brought it home to me. However, in saying that, it appears that KE offices are as busy, if not busier, than normal. We ran a bit of a kind of copy survey of an autumn survey that they did for members looking at the impact of COVID on tech transfer offices or KE offices. The autumn survey that came out really tried to highlight that there was a great increase in activity, a lot of increase in disclosures, and great demands on KE office staff time. On the downside, it did highlight this likely future squeeze on budgets, which I think wouldn't come as a particular surprise for MD. And so we were encouraged to replicate that survey for the UK. Which we did, and we also added on another couple of questions just to try and ensure that we captured the kind of UK specific stuff. Some of the US questions were a bit tricky for some of our institutions to answer. The big take home from that survey for me, and it was a director's survey that we sent out, was that a lot of our directors opened the survey, told me where their institution was located, and then didn't answer any of the questions, which obviously wasn't ideal. It kind of suggested that they were they're interested to know what questions we were asking, and then ultimately wanted to know what everybody else was saying, but not necessarily wanting to chip in their view. Those who did, I have to say it was quite a similar viewpoint to the one expressed and highlighted in the autumn survey. High demand on staff, which I'm sure people around the meeting today would be nodding and agreeing with, and also highlighting a real increase in COVID-related activities. So where they were seeing some increases in areas, there was a massive increase if they were getting involved in COVID type stuff. The challenges that they highlighted were in responding to academics and university admin. I think the timeline that people might have been used to was getting a lot shorter as we were in lockdown and working from home, and that was putting extra pressures. And most of the directors highlighted that they were having some difficulty with maintaining normal services, but I think that would be kind of admirable given the upheaval that they've encountered. We did ask about the KEF areas and where whether they saw increases or decreases, and I would say that the ones that highlighted decreases were what you might expect. So CPD, equipment use and access to facilities, and public engagement. So all those three areas were significantly down. So that's an autumn survey and a Praxis survey that we did. Tamsin, you mentioned that there was an ESRC report on Innovate UK grant holders.
Yeah, so ERC, the Enterprise Research Centre, did a survey for Innovate UK amongst Innovate UK grant holders. So this was to assess the impact of COVID on their activities. So this is looking very much at the demand side. And they did this, the survey results that have just been released or a couple of weeks ago were based on a survey done in July, so fairly early into lockdown. And they're doing another one at the moment this month to see what how much those findings have been reinforced or challenged maybe. And I think it's it's interesting that they've so this is a very specific group of collaborators. Clearly, it's the innovative companies. Alasdair and I looked at the UK Innovation Survey before August, and we saw there's a very small number of companies actively collaborating with universities. So this is if not all, that's a good chunk of that small group. But the kind of key message for universities was that there was going to be a no change in activity or quite a severe reduction, some up to 50%, I think. So that was back in July. Whether that outlook has changed, and I mean, Stephen Roper, who co-authored the report, called for more nuance in understanding the dynamics of this demand side. And I think that relates to the discussion we had about SMEs, because there were different responses depending on the company size, whether it was a micro, medium-sized or a large SME, and also the sector which they're based in. And just picking up on what we found in the PraxisAuril survey, so companies which were dependent on using university-based facilities and equipment for samples, for example, or clean rooms or whatever kind of specialised kit they need, where they weren't able to access those facilities because of lockdown, of course, they were the most hard hit in terms of continuing their grant activity. So it's kind of reassuring to see that we can match up, we can see the crossover between those two kinds of reports. It's interesting that they also found a small group of companies, very R&D focused, who had no change to their R&D ambitions in terms of spend and actually accessing more grants through the crisis. And I suppose that's where the whole business is entirely focused on that R&D. It's not, I imagine, not so dependent on being close to market, but on keeping that innovation moving. And again, maybe in sectors where there are opportunities arising from the crisis, so artificial intelligence and things that are dependent on computing or distance-based market opportunities. I suppose that kind of thing came out in that report. Bohurst have done another report, which I've only briefly looked at, which focuses on scale up and spin out, you know, their portfolio companies. So I'm going to have a look at that as well and see how that very specific group has fared. But that's, you know, a known for us is that investment in that group of companies has slowed down because investors are more risk averse because of the pandemic.
I mean, it was interesting. So KTP is an Innovate UK programme. We've, you know, that I've got a bit of knowledge of. We've had some interesting discussions because the Innovate UK has been quite keen to help, you know, support a lot of those companies introducing their own schemes alongside the UK government's furlough scheme, and I guess there's a bit of a hesitancy and a you know, holding our breath to see what happens once the furlough scheme comes to an end, if indeed that is what happens at the end of October. There's a feeling that a number of companies might be kind of barely treading water, and then once that happens. However, on the other side of that, you know, we've certainly seen a good number of projects coming forward that have been created across the UK, not just in my own patch. You know, companies wanting to work with universities, building their applications under lockdown conditions. So yeah, that's a positive.
That's right. And I think, you know, the ERC sample is so specific because it's existing Innovate UK grant holders. And it did make me think, well, what about non-Innovate UK grant holders, and whether the difficulties that many SMEs are facing now, or many businesses, let alone SMEs, but, you know, as that big group, whether it will encourage them to look again at this kind of support that universities are offering. And when I spoke on a CBI panel about this last week, I've been really impressed, not only with how universities have addressed the crisis, of course, but with how they have really made an effort to market business support services, whether that's on their own or in these kind of collaborations, you know, the business support hubs that have really being promoted through you know, whether it's in the Midlands Engine or the Northern Powerhouse or wherever it is. There's quite a few of these business support hubs now. So what the ERC refers to as kind of softer skills collaboration, I do wonder whether we'll see a slight uptick in that kind of support rather than what we might consider to be the traditional R&D areas. And I suppose that it'll be interesting to see what the uptake for the management KTP is in that respect, and whether people are trying to access support for their business operations as much as for products and services, and you know, where they're more reliant on the science base, if you like.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the one I did have a quick read through the CBI's response to the R&D roadmap, and they made a big play for this Accelerate UK type thing, which is, you know, non-leading edge innovation, almost Me Too innovation, and them saying that, you know, this is an area where there's great traction. I guess that's not potentially as interesting from a university, you know, leading edge technology point of view, but from a UK innovation adoption and potentially moving on to more leading edge, then that has to be an interesting.
And I think that kind of non-leading edge innovation argument has certainly been put forward in kind of civic university narratives. You know, it's not necessarily about that kind of bleeding edge, I suppose. It might just be about helping companies to understand what opportunities are, or helping a community of companies to understand what opportunities are, and what, you know, the Spark initiative around Hull, which was nominated in the KTP award, the Exchange Awards last year, is a nice example of that. You know, just really engaging with the local business community and seeing what they need, rather than, I suppose, making assumptions that it has to be about something very groundbreaking. We might see more of that. It'd be interesting to see whether that's true. The ERC didn't actually find much appetite, or much, they didn't see companies anticipating that kind of support from universities. It has to be said, but that was back in July, so it'll be interesting to see what they say in October. And I think the other thing about the ERC was they were going to reach out through the KTN as well, so accessing a slightly larger group of companies who are accessing university support in slightly different ways, or research-based support in slightly different ways.
I guess there's also the CBI launched their tech, is it tech tracker survey,
Yeah.
which is looking at innovation adoption within
Yeah.
businesses as well.
Yeah, so there's a big push from the CBI for the potential of digital platforms and digital tech to transform companies. And that's again, it's about that kind of non-leading edge innovation, but just getting companies, everybody has sprung onto, it's amazing how quickly we've adopted these kinds of platforms that we're using now. So can we keep that going, and can that potential be expanded?
Okay, so let's move on to things that are coming up, what's on the radar. So our brief brainstorm that we came up with lots of acronyms. So KEF, KEC, HEBSI, HIFE. So we've got the, but there's something else. Did I miss something off?
No, I think that's it. I think that's it.
That's it. So so let's do a first then. Let's try a quick poll. So one, I'm assuming you know what those acronyms stand for. And the next question is, which ones do you see as being, important for you? So those of you who were doing other things and not paying attention, please stop now and and just answer this question. If I launch this poll, magic should happen. So which of the following do you see as something you'll be getting involved with going forward? So we've got KEF, KEC, HEBSI, HIFE, or I'll just be getting on with helping academics work with businesses. I'll give you...
All of the above. We should have had an all of the above, shouldn't we? Because some people are doing all of the above.
Yeah, I should say that if Phil Clare doesn't click KEC, then I'm going to be reporting them to various people at UUK, I think.
And I suppose we should say part of the purpose of this is just to understand where PraxisAuril, can focus in the next few months, because there is a lot going on. Some of it closer to now than others.
It might also focus our conversation for the next 10 minutes as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So right, so I'm going to give another 5 seconds.
To be fair, it may not apply. It may not apply to everybody. So
I guess my Scottish friends who are on will be like, I have no interest in a lot of little HIFE or stuff. I've been very naughty and not. You haven't
acknowledged the devolved nations in that poll,
which is terrible. I'll have a public apology ready for the next KE and coffee. Right, so I'm going to stop it there, and then I think if I do this, we can see, everybody should be able to see the results. So half the people just getting on with the day job, and as we might have expected, KEF and KEC. The other two. Interesting that I thought the HEBSIS review might have been a bit more. Is that still a bit behind closed doors at the moment, Tamsin?
HEBSIS?
Yeah.
Well, I know there was a steering committee review at a meeting last week, I think, that Sean was involved in, but I've seen nothing about HEBSIS. I've described it as a kind of unicorn galloping away on the horizon, because it just seems to keep moving. But I'm expecting them to be talking about it fairly soon.
I'm a bit worried, because I remember I was on a Research England webinar where they had a big poll about how to pronounce the HEBCIS thing, and I think it was HEBC. I think it was a HEBC. Someone can correct me in the chat. So I think we both pronounced it wrong, but I'm famous for pronouncing things or saying things incorrectly on KE and coffee, so we won't let that stop us before.
But it's interesting to say that KEF and KEC is clearly, of the two, clearly people are getting on helping academics work with business, which is getting on with the bread and butter. But that KEF and KEC are, they're the new things, aren't they? We've known they're coming, but the KEC in particular, with the implementation plans just released and this deadline of October the 26th for unveiling more paperwork. I'll kind of term it like that. Phil, sorry, apologies to Phil. So that's very much, the KEF is a kind of known unknown, because we don't quite know what the spider diagrams are going to look like. The KEC is much more of an unknown, because it's only just really started to be, the details only just started to be released. So yeah.
So I've noticed that Sue Graham's proposing or volunteering to share a handy little key, what's happening when.
Yeah, and I've just noted in the chat that on our website we do have a key dates in KE page, which is chronically out of date, and I do apologise for that. But yeah, I will get that updated because I think it is very useful. There are a lot of dates flying around. Hamish actually had a very useful little, Hamish McAlpine had a very useful little chart of what was happening when, so I shall double check all the dates with Research England as well, and other administrations if they want to contribute to that list of dates, because it is good to have it all in one place.
Right, okay, so I'm reminded of yesterday's UUK webinar where Peter Matheson, the Vice-Chancellor at Edinburgh University, was bemoaning the fact that himself or his institution and his Scottish colleagues couldn't get involved in KEF in any way, but so I'm sure there were representation from the Scottish Funding Council. They've been involved in it from day one, I think. I think
they can get involved if they. I think they can do their modelling if they want to. I don't think it's just they don't have to.
Yeah. Okay. So other changes that are coming down the line that might have impact on people. I had noted that. So we've got the chief exec stepping down, whose name has just ran out of my head as I'm about to. Ian Campbell, Innovate UK. So he's stepping down to join LifeArc, and there's a constant stream of pleads on LinkedIn that I seem to be getting for please help us find our next executive chair. So
the deadline's this week, isn't it? I think for the new. Yeah. So, time to get your application in, Alasdair.
Yeah, anybody who's on the call who's interested, your time's running out. You need to.
But it's interesting that there's when people who've, the structural changes are quite interesting as well. Alongside all this policy stuff that's going on, the structural changes at UKRI, the new leadership at UKRI could have quite a big impact on how we do things and how we talk about things. Already, I have slightly changed our R&D roadmap response messaging so that it picks, we did pick up on that point about our members being part of the R&D community. But it's important to bring these things out, as they match the new kind of, I suppose, emphasis that these, very senior people do introduce into the sector. So that's something we need to bear in mind. We have the new commercialisation team at UKRI as well, of course, Tony Soterio and Alice Porter and Alex Cheggs, who's joined there, which is great news. So that's going to have an influence, and then there's these changes do have ramifications as to how well we know our stakeholders and the kind of roots we have in and how effective our messaging is. So it's good to have Phil Clare safely in the chair on the KE Concordat, I have to say.
It's interesting when you mentioned Phil. So Oxford, got a lot of plaudits for its activity around their approaches to IP, also the great work that they're doing around the vaccine stuff. But we'd had a brief, discussion about whether, some of the activities we've been doing underneath, while we've been in lockdown or in this very unusual situation, might have longer term ramifications for the sector. Yeah,
I certainly think I would be surprised if that UKRI team aren't looking very closely at how commercialisation teams have been, using the non-exclusive royalty-free licenses and other kind of, compressing that pipeline to market and seeing what might be used in whatever passes for normal in 6 months' time. I was given again in a panel I was involved with last week. Somebody mentioned IP coming under scrutiny again, IP terms. So these are not new battles we have to fight, but I think because of the pandemic and because of the attention that universities have got for very good reasons, there is now questions started to be asked about the role of universities, about the role of research, and and how it can be used for economic and societal impact, and why do we just go back to the way we were doing things before, or do we learn from our experiences and try and do things differently? There's a useful note from Claire in the chat, Phil Claire in the chat. I've just noticed. So yeah, I think we do, as a community, we need to think about what we've learned, what we might like to do differently in the future. And I do see the Concordat as a space for talking about the KE of the future, rather than always looking back and say, well, this is how we did things and this is where we are now. It should be about looking forward. And if you think that Hive's been around for 20 years now, 10 years in its current format roughly, PraxisAuril is coming up for 20 years young soon. You know, we've all grown up in KE, a lot of us, and so it's probably, I do think it's a good time to think about past challenges and future challenges, and how this pandemic has kind of, I suppose, shortcut the distance between those two things.
Right, so we've managed to pretty much use up all of our time. I guess I would be interested if MD's, the chat's been quite busy, so I'm going to potentially not ask if anybody's got specific questions, because I'm quite keen that we do finish on time. One thing that I will do, I meant to do this at the start, but if I do it now, so there's another very quick questions, a couple of poll questions that if I launch, if you could just, before you maybe exit, if you could help me with answering them, that would be really helpful, just so where if you've been to one of these before, and if and where you heard about it, and
acknowledging that this one it was quite short notice, but
yeah. So I guess our schedule going forward, Tamsin, is going to be, what did we say, every couple of weeks? We're going
every
to
2 weeks, yeah, every 2 weeks.
Okay, so thanks again, Tamsin. That's really interesting. Stay tuned, everybody, and we'll announce what's coming up. There's quite a lot as everybody returns back from holiday and starts to get into things. There's a lot of policy stuff coming down the line, so we're trying to make sure we pick something that's relevant to as many people as possible.
And if if there's something you'd really like us to talk about, particularly anything you think we've missed today, then do let us know, because I'm always happy to add to the reading pile.
Okay, that's fantastic. So if I'll quickly share the results for those that are still hanging around. So most, well, 70% have been here before, so that's great. Welcome back. 30% new to us. Well, hopefully you'll come back again. It's been really great to have you with us. And most of the people heard about it through our newsletter, which is a great, we'll feed that back to the team. That's a really positive thing for us. Okay, so thanks, Tamsin. Thanks everybody for joining us. Have a safe time for the rest of the days for you. For those of you going to pick up small children, be careful out there. Okay, right. Okay, good to see you. See you again. Bye.
Okay, bye.